MCC. Stand if you can and sing with us. We're going to continue to sing throughout these next 20 minutes or so. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for joining us online.
Welcome to MCC. We're happy that you're here today. If we're new to you, if you're new to us, we love you. We're happy that you're here. We want to get to know you. You can find out more about us by texting new to MCC to 94,000. You can also fill out your connection card and drop that by the welcome desk out in the lobby. Man, today is a fun day. It's 4th of July weekend. You guys like 4th of July? I like 4th of July. I don't really have any time for stories. I've got a lot of 4th of July stories. You can talk to me later. John who does the announcements on video sometimes. He's my cousin, and we used to put on a 4th of July bash. His dad would do the cooking, but I would light the fireworks, and then John did the announcing, and man, it was awesome. And I know what you're thinking. Why does a fireworks show need an announcer? And it's for the political humor and the religious material we like to do. and it was pretty fun, but I'll tell you this, it's less dangerous to have John on video than it is to have a live mic. And that's why his videos are heavily edited when he does those. They're good videos. They're highly informational, but they're heavily edited. Now, if you're not new to us, if you know all about us, then we would encourage you to give. You can text a dollar amount to 84321. You can go to monetcommunity.church/give and give that way. Or if you have paper money, if you have checks or cash, you can put it in an envelope, put it in the silver box at the back on your way out. Now, we have a lot of announcements, so story time is over. We have to do backpacks, boxes, bash, blood, D1, kids camp, and breakfast and brunch. Now, before we came in here, Taylor and Morgan and Ruby, my daughter, we were sitting and talking, and the conversation turned to what it always turns to when Ruby's involved, and that is, man, my dad is so old. But could an old guy remember all those announcements like that? I mean, come on, it's pretty good, right? So announcement number 1 is backpacks. Hopefully you remembered to bring your crayons for this week. This is crayon week. And then next week is pencil box week. Bring your pencil boxes. And then you're supposed to bring a backpack just anytime you think about it. This, I'm not donating this one. This is mine. It's got stars on it. But then also, because it's mine, my backpack has a snack in it. It's bacon. And this is for Gabe because he's doing keto. And he's looking good. But bring your backpacks. Don't forget. This is a great way to give back to our community. We're going to have a back-to-school bash, and that's on August 6th from 5 to 8 p.m. What you do is you bring these school supplies, and then we give them to the families in the community. School supplies are expensive. My wife's a teacher. We spend a lot of money on school stuff all the time. Not every year, just like every day. We spend a lot of money on school stuff. It's costly, and this is a good way to give back. Next up, as advertised, blood drive. I don't give blood because I pass out, but you can if you want. That's on Monday, July 24th. It starts at 12:30. It's a Monday. Put it in your calendar so you don't forget. Next up, D1. D1 is on July 16th. This, if you're new to us, this is a great way to find out what's going on at MCC. What do they believe in? What are we doing here? D1 is a good thing to show up to. You're going to want to put that in your calendar as well. Don't miss. You can sign up for that on the website. Next up, Kids Camp. Kids Camp, I think it's like Vacation Bible School, but because I'm old, like that's, to me, it's VBS, right? So I'm 44. I'm going to be 45. So to me, it's like cookies and Kool-Aid, right? But it's a lot cooler than that now. I don't think we're painting any ceramic bunnies. That's what happened at my Bible school. But I don't think we do that here. It's a lot hipper. Pastor Jonathan, he's got it going on. That's Kids Camp. It's July 10th through the 13th. And then men's breakfast or women's brunch at the branch. This is a good one. This is this coming weekend. So don't miss men's breakfast and women's brunch at the branch. That's on Saturday. The men go first at 8 because, you know, some things you can't control. And then the women will go after that at 9 o'clock. I think I got it all. Is that everything? We're going to do King of Kings next, and it's a lot of fun. Taylor's using a new keyboard sound. It's got Michael W. Smith vibes. And well, we're all just trying to find our place in this world. So stand up and say hello to one another. Tell each other what your favorite Michael W. Smith song is, and you can date yourself.
Praise the
here believe there's nothing God can't do? Sing that this morning. Just one word, you calm the storm surrounds me. Just one word, the darkness has to retreat. Just one touch, I feel the presence of heaven. Just one touch, my eyes were open to see. My heart can't help but believe. No, there's nothing that our God can't do. There's not a mountain that He can't move. Oh, praise the name that makes a way. There's nothing that our God can't do. Just one word, you heal what's broken inside. Just one word, and you revive every dream. Just one touch, I feel the power of heaven. Just one touch, my eyes were open to see. My heart can't help but believe. No, it's nothing that our God can't do. There's not a mountain that He can't move. Oh, praise the name that makes a way. There's nothing that our God can't do. I believe there's nothing that our God can't do. It's not a prison wall He can't break through. Oh, praise the name that makes a way. There's nothing that our God can't do. I will believe for greater things. There's no power like the power of Jesus. Let faith arise, let all agree. There's no power like the power of Jesus. I will believe for greater things. There's no power like the power of Jesus. Let faith arise, let all agree. There's no power. Let's sing that again. I will believe. I will believe for greater things. There's no power like the power of Jesus. Let faith arise, let all agree. There's no power like His power. There's nothing that our God can't do. There's not a mountain that He can't move. Oh, praise the name that makes a way. There's nothing that our God can't do. I believe there's nothing that our God can't do. There's not a prison wall He can't break through. Oh, praise the name that makes a way. There's nothing that our God can't do. Oh, 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 oh.
this joy is mine. With 1,000 hallelujahs, we magnify your name. You alone deserve the glory, the honor, and the praise. Lord Jesus, this song is forever yours. 1,000 hallelujahs and 1,000 more. Else would die for our redemption. His resurrection is our rise. Who is in time enough to sing of all you've done? But I have eternity to try.
With 1,000 hallelujahs, we magnify your name. You alone deserve the glory, the honor, and the praise. Lord Jesus, this song is forever yours. 1,000 hallelujahs, 1,000
Praise to the Lord, to the Lamb, to the King of heaven. Praise, for he rose, now he reigns. We will sing forever. Praise to the Lord, to the Lamb, to the King of heaven. Praise, for he rose, now he reigns. We will sing forever. With 1,000 hallelujahs, we magnify your name. You alone deserve the glory, the honor, and the praise. Lord Jesus, this song is forever yours. 1,000 hallelujahs and 1,000 more. With 1,000 hallelujahs, we magnify your name. You alone deserve the glory, the honor, and the praise. Lord Jesus, this song is forever yours. 1,000 hallelujahs and 1,000 more.
Father in heaven, you alone deserve the glory. There's nothing you can't do. We believe that this morning. I ask that your spirit would continue to move in this place. God, you would continue to speak to us through Todd. We want to hear a word from you this morning as we crack the book open of Esther, where we begin to see your hand over every situation. In that story, let
us see your hand over every situation and circumstance in our life. Open our eyes to your goodness. Help us remember your goodness. Lord, we love you. We trust you. We want to be different people because we spent time in your presence. In Jesus' name, for your glory, Lord. Amen. Thanks for worshiping with us. Have a seat.
It's been a minute. I didn't know how to work a microphone anymore. But guys, it's great to be back. If you don't know who I am, my name is Todd. I've been out for a few weeks. It's been 5-6 weeks. I had to, for you guys who don't know, my wife has been going through some cancer stuff, and we've got some special circumstances at home with some special needs kiddos, and so we've been have to tend to that. Man, just so grateful to all of you, though. One of the goals I had when I came here 5 years ago, I said, man, I'd love to make all this work, but without me, the things would just continue to move on and push forward and everything, whether I'm here or not. And our staff team has done an amazing job, the elders, the volunteers, man, you guys have just been great. So thank you so much for stepping up, stepping out to let God keep doing what God needs to do during this time, and very grateful for that. But hopefully we'll be back in the saddle for a while. We're getting ready to move. We moved out of the surgery phase, getting ready to move into the chemo phase, and we'll see how things go with that. But very grateful and thankful for all the food, the cards, the prayers. Man, just so incredibly grateful. And you guys have made a very tough situation a lot more bearable because of our church family. So thank you so much for that. Greatly, greatly, greatly appreciate it. So hope you're having a great 4th of July weekend. It's amazing how we've started turning in holiday weekends into holiday weeks. I was actually up at Siteman Cancer Center this week getting my cancer scans because I had cancer a few years ago. I told my oncologist, we can't both have cancer at the same time, so all this needs to be good. And it was, so that's fantastic that I'm still clear, and that's a great thing. But man, like Siteman's shutting down for the week, for the 4th of July holiday. I'm like, holy cow, what in the world? But man, I hope you guys are going to enjoy a great 4th of July. If you are at the lake or something watching us online, I hope you guys are being safe. Let go of the firecrackers before they go off, okay? Keep all your fingers and toes, but enjoy a great 4th of July holiday. But it is great to be back and excited about today. And excited about what we're going to talk about, and even as I kind of start, it may feel like you're excited about this, but one of the things when it comes to faith, in fact, what I would say is one of the hardest things when it comes to faith are those seasons, those moments, those times in our lives where we feel like God is absent, or we feel like God is silent. And I'm pretty confident if you are a Jesus follower and you've been a Jesus follower for any length of time, you've gone through those seasons, those moments, those times in your life when, man, you are praying the prayers, you are looking for God, but all you get back in return is all you're feeling is just this silence coming back to you. If you're here today and it's one of those deals where you're maybe investigating faith, or maybe you're watching online and you're investigating faith, or maybe you're just skeptical about all of it. This is one of those things that, man, you point to and you go, man, this is one of the reasons I'm skeptical, is that, there's those times, those seasons of life, where's God? Where's God and everything going on in the world? He's just absent, right? He's just silent. But one of the things that I also know is that regardless of which side of the faith thing you're on right now, when we hit those seasons and we hit those moments of life, when we get that phone call that our teenager was in a bad car accident, when we hear those words from a doctor that, man, yes, it does look like it's cancer, when we're going through those marital problems and we are scared to death, when we're dealing with the financial problems and we do not know how ends are going to meet and if we're going to keep our house, when we're going through those legal problems, regardless of where you really fall on the faith or no faith things, there's a really good chance that you're throwing up a prayer. Now, you may not know who or to what or to whom you're throwing a prayer up to, but you're praying, you're saying something. You want intervention on this. We long to experience the presence of God in that moment. We want to see a glimpse of God's power through those things, but sometimes he just seems absent. Sometimes he feels distant or preoccupied. I mean, maybe we feel like God is just unconcerned about what we're going through. And we can start to feel that way even more and more is because we think, man, God's going to fix this or God's going to fix that, and he's going to do it in the next hour. I mean, that's just my God. Or surely by the end of the day, God, if he's really concerned, he's going to have a solution for this. But absolutely, man, it's by Friday this week, it's Monday now, by Friday this week, man, I know he is going to take care of that. If he's really there, this will absolutely be resolved by the end of the week. But then those moments, we just feel the silence. Crickets. Yeah, but then I look back, and I've been a Jesus follower now for, 34 years. Gee whiz, I'm older than Jackson. But I look back in those moments. And I think back through the crises, and I think that if you're a Jesus follower, you can do the same thing. You can think back through the challenges. You can think back through those times when things were hard. And as you look back on it now, You see that conversation that just happened to occur. You see that person that was put in your path that all of a sudden it changed the trajectory of things. You can see that check that came in the mail that you weren't expecting that changed how everything was going to come down. And we start to realize that had to be God. God had to be involved in that, and God was with us all along. And while we may feel like God is sometimes absent in the moment, the thing we have to understand, the thing we have to process through is God's plan is always active, and his will is always, always, always invincible. Now, hang on to that. You're going to hear that a lot probably through this series. So today we're starting this new series called Esther. I couldn't get any more creative than that because we're going to talk about a lady named Esther. All right. So we're just calling the series Esther. And what we're going to do over the next several weeks is really we're going to look at this amazing, brave, godly, strong, bold woman and how God orchestrated and how God leveraged and how God worked behind the scenes in what seemed like an incredibly impossible situation to keep his promises to a nation and to accomplish his will in this world. Now, the story of Esther, if you've never read it, my encouragement, in fact, here, I'll just give you your homework now. Here's your homework for this week. Here's what I want you to do. Read the story of Esther. It's really not that long. We're going to be going through it. You reading it ahead of time is not a bad thing. But the story of Esther is an absolutely just edge of your seat type of story. There's all sorts of stuff. There's these indulgent, just unbelievable parties. There's a Miss Persia pageant that goes on, and we look at the contestant there. And there's a couple of different murder plots that are happening in the story. There's intrigue. There's deception. There's this genocidal maniac that just has to be stopped. I mean, it's like a movie plot, but all this is in the Bible. It's in this one little book in the Old Testament. And one of the things, though, that's very, very interesting about the book of Esther is that even though it's a book in the Bible, a relatively famous book of the Bible, God is actually never mentioned. If you're in a trivia, if you're at a bar some night and you're having a trivia contest, what's the only book of the Bible that never mentions God? I'd love them to ask that question in a bar. Wouldn't that be great? You know the answer now. It's Esther. But despite the fact that God's never mentioned, what we can see throughout this entire story is incredibly evident that God is incredibly active. Esther was a Jewish woman. living in what would they say, in exile in Persia. Now, let me give you just a little bit of history. I can't connect all the dots. I don't have time today to do all that. But the Jewish people, they basically had a civil war. This happened 150, 200 years before all this is happening with Esther. Had a civil war, broke into the northern kingdom, the southern kingdom. They had kings. Both of them had kings. The kings didn't do really a great job. They didn't follow God real well. So the Assyrians went in and captured the northern kingdom. Eventually, the Babylonians came in and captured the southern kingdom, so that's what they call it, the Babylonian exile, and a lot of people were taken out of Jerusalem. Well, this story is happening roughly about 100 years after Jewish people returned to Jerusalem. So really, this is a story of a group of Jewish people, a community of Jewish people that were still living in exile in Susa, in the nation of Persia, and that's where Esther, that's where we're going to find Esther. Now, for Esther, she was an orphan. Her parents died when she was young. I can't imagine the hurt, the pain, the anguish. I can't imagine losing my parents now, much less losing them when I was a kid. And she was raised by her uncle. So Esther's just this ordinary, average Jewish woman, really nothing big, elaborate about her, a humble foreigner in a foreign land. But then God's going to use one of the most unlikely people in Esther, and one of the most unlikely ways, and put her in the right place at the right time to stop the genocide of her people. Now, I look at a story like that and go, man, only God could do that. Only God could do that. God's hand had to be in the, his plan is always active, his will is always invincible. And what I'm really hoping that over the next several weeks we can get out of this and that we can understand through the story of Esther is that we can really learn to look for God's activity in the everyday life. To look for God's activity in our everyday life. That's going to come up more and more and more. Now, that's the background. That's the setup to Esther. I set up weekends are sometimes a little bit of a disjointed mess, so I apologize for that. But that's that. But there's a couple things that I feel like we need to talk about God. A couple attributes of God. It's a couple aspects of God that we really need to understand the story of Esther and understand how it applies to our lives and the things in our lives. So let me give you two things. Big picture, not story of Esther type stuff, but then we're going to get back to Esther. The first thing we need to understand about God, number one, is God is sovereign. God is sovereign. Now, some of you knows what that means. Some of you may not know what that means. So let me explain that. What's it mean to be sovereign? It means this. We'll throw a definition up on the screen. To be sovereign is God is absolute in authority and unrestricted in supremacy. He is absolute. That's an absolute statement. God is absolute in authority and unrestricted in supremacy. It means that God has the power, he has the wisdom, he has the authority to do anything he chooses, however he chooses, within his creation. Now, the Apostle Paul, who wrote a lot of the New Testament letters he wrote to the churches, there's a book called Romans, it's in the New Testament. He explains this idea of sovereignty, to me, just in a phenomenal way. And let me just share this with you. In Romans chapter 11, he writes, "Oh, the depth of the riches of the wisdom and knowledge of God. How unsearchable his judgments and his paths beyond tracing out. It defies the ability of our minds to find or to understand the depths of the mind of God. The mind of God and his judgments are unsearchable by the human mind. We can't begin to scratch the surface of the unsearchable mind and judgments of God." That's sovereignty. Paul goes on. Who has known the mind of God? These are kind of rhetorical questions he's asking here. The answer is no one. No one's understood fully the mind of God. Or who has been his counselor? I just thought that was kind of funny even to say that. I mean, who's ever gone to God and said, God, let me give you a little piece of advice here. I mean, who's ever gone to God and said, God, you know what? Have you really thought about it from this angle? Have you really thought about it from this side, God? God, when I went through this, here's what I did, God, and I think you really should consider that. God, if you would just, I mean, who's ever done that? Again, the answer is no one. No one, because he's sovereign. One more verse here, verse 35. Who has ever given to God that God should repay him. So who's ever been indebted? Who's God ever been indebted to? To whom has God ever said, oh man, whew, glad you were there. You saved my backside. Man, if you hadn't been there, I'd be in so much trouble right now. I owe you one. Who's God ever had to say that to? No one. No one. He's sovereign. He has absolute authority and unrestricted supremacy. God's plan is always active and his will is always invincible. He's sovereign. Now, why is that important? In the middle of those circumstances that have us baffled, in the middle of those things where we're wondering, what are we going to do? How are we going to do it? Or even how are we going to go on? We can rest in the truth. We can rest in the truth that God's power and God's sovereign control are already at work. Even though we don't understand it, God's power and God's sovereign control are already at work. God understands it. We may not, but God does. And the thing that we wrestle with, and part of it is because human beings are prideful. I am prideful. One of the things is if we come to God with just sheer reason, I got to understand this, 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 man, we're going to find ourselves at a loss. We're going to find ourselves at a loss in certain situations to understand the depth of his wisdom, the depth of his mind, the unsearchable nature of his ways. But if we come to God with an open heart, if we come to God with our faith, if we come in those ways, we'll find out that he's waiting there with open arms, ready to accept, receive, and fill us with his power. Because he's sovereign. I mean, the thing we have to understand is God never really knows frustration. We get frustrated. God doesn't know frustration. God's never sitting there scratching his head wondering, man, what in the world am I going to do with them? Man, what am I going to do with that person? What am I going to do with that group? What am I going to do with that nation? What am I going to do with that leader? And you may think, and you may have said it, and again, especially if you're kind of skeptical, you may be thinking, well, God's got his hands full with me. No, he doesn't. He's got you under control. He knows what he's doing. God is sovereign. Because God is sovereign, he has absolute authority and unrestricted in his supremacy. God's plans are always acted. His will is always invincible. But then the second kind of big picture thing we need to understand about our God is that number two, God has divine providence. So what's providence mean? Let me break it down like a fraction. Let's talk about this. The word providence, our word providence, comes from Latin, and I'm going to pretend that I speak Latin now. It comes from the word Latin providentia. Providentia very simply means to see ahead of time. To see ahead of time. Unlike you and I, we like to think we know what's going to happen. We like to think we can predict the future sometimes. But unlike you and I, God actually has the ability in his sovereignty to see ahead of time and to know what's going to happen. God knows this because he has divine providence. Romans 8:28, this is the Apostle Paul again. We know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. Now, I don't have time to chase it but this whole concept of sovereignty and providence sometimes can create a tension in people, again, especially if you're skeptical to things. And it's legit. I'm going to tell you, it's a legit tension that you can create because, and I don't have time. I could do a whole message series probably on this. I'm just going to sideswipe this today just to hopefully satisfy this tension just a little bit. Because some people say, well, Todd, what about free will, though? What about free will? If we have free will, is God really sovereign? Is God really providential in that? The thing is, God can work in any number of ways when it comes to working in the world. And yes, God actually, and absolutely, he can work directly to accomplish his will. God can part the waters. God can heal. God can directly intervene and directly be involved in a situation. He can impact that to act according to his plan and his will. But a way that God also works, and probably works, it seems like, more frequently, is God works indirectly through our free will and through our choices. God has the ability to work through our good choices to accomplish his plan and accomplish his will. But God can even leverage our bad choices. We're going to see a little bit of that as we get into the story of Esther today. But he can even leverage our bad choices to still accomplish his plan and his will. Now, when we do the bad choices, when we do those things, yes, we will still feel the effects of our bad decisions and choices. But our choices don't change God's plan or stop God's will. Now, those are the 30,000-foot view things. Those are the big things that I want us to understand about God. Why is this important? Why do I need to talk about the fact that God is sovereign, that God has the ability to know and see what's going to happen ahead of time? This is important because as we look at a book that never mentions God, we can still see God's sovereignty and we can still see God's providence on display. And the more we embrace these two big truths in our lives, the better we can trust and the better we can start to see God's activity in our day-to-day lives. So, remember this. I'm hoping you will be back for the whole series. Sovereignty and providence. Sovereignty and providence. We're going to be dealing with that throughout this whole series. Very, 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 very important. Now, back to our regularly scheduled program, which is Esther. Esther, the Jewish exile living in Susa in Persia. And I don't have a tremendous amount of time left because I had so much setup to do, but let me set up the setup to get us started moving forward in the book of Esther, to set us up for Esther to come on the scene next week. So if you have a Bible, you want to follow along, we're just going to start Esther chapter 1, verse 1. This is what happened during the time of Xerxes. The Xerxes has ruled over 127 provinces stretching from India to Cush. Now, Xerxes was kind of a big deal. He was the king of Persia. He ruled a territory. They said it was like 2.1 million square miles, or million, how do you say it right? Million square miles. But anyway, big area, okay? The United States is like 3.8 million square miles. So his territory, or his kingdom, was roughly about 55%-ish of the size of the United States. So again, pretty big deal. Xerxes... Xerxes was very proud of Xerxes, okay? He was pretty full of himself. He was a pretty confident, maybe arrogant type of guy. And Xerxes wanted to display this, wanted to show this power, this wealth, these things that he had. Now, so Xerxes was a player, so what's a player going to do? He's a player's going to play. So Xerxes decides to throw a party that's going to put Kim Kardashian to shame, all right? So he throws this massive party, verse 3. In the third year of his reign, so he's been king for 3 years. In the third year of his reign, he gave a banquet for all his nobles and officials, the military leaders of Persia, Media, there we go. The princes and the nobles of the provinces were present. For a full, and this is great, for a full 180 days. Guys, how long is that? 6 months. He partied for 6 months. He was proud of himself. He's proud of what he had. And if that wasn't enough, he says this, he says he displayed the vast wealth of his kingdom and the splendor and the glory of his majesty. He showed off his wealth. He had fancy parades, loud music, wild dancing. I mean, the Golden Corral buffet was open 24/7. There was an open bar. Everybody could get everything they wanted to drink, free drinks for everyone. But then if that wasn't enough, at the end of the 6-month banquet, this 6-month big bash that they were having, he decided, hey, this is so much fun, let's keep going. And he opened up his palace for a 7-day, and I just have no other way to describe this, a 7-day kegger, okay? He opened the palace and said, hey, everybody inside. Just look what it says here, verse 7. Wine was served in goblets of gold, each one different from the other, and the royal wine was abundant, in keeping with the king's liberality. By the king's command, each guest was allowed to drink in his own way. For the king instructed all the wine stewards to serve each man with what he wished. Now, this 7-day big kegger, big bash he's throwing in the palace that Xerxes is hosting is just for the men. It's for the kingdom and there. But the important women of the kingdom were in a different location, in a different place, and they were being hosted by the queen, by a lady named Vashti. Now, I mean, I don't even know if my mind can comprehend 187 they're having, but things are getting crazy. Things are getting a little out of hand. Everybody's eating, drinking, being merry. Everybody's happy. I mean, why not? He's just giving the people everything they want. But then everything happens. And it's a pivotal moment that's going to set the scene, that's going to set the story for the rest of this series. So here it is. So this is the final day of the 187-day party. When King Xerxes was in high spirits from wine, that's a great way of saying he was soused, okay, he was drunk. He commanded the 7 eunuchs who served him, and I didn't put them on the screen. You guys can look them up. As you already know, horrible with Bible names. Verse 11. He instructed the eunuchs who served him to bring before him Queen Vashti. She's over hosting the women, doing their thing. They're having a grand time over there. To bring before him Queen Vashti wearing her royal crown in order to display her. I could pause right there, right? Ladies, how you feel about that? A little bit bold. I mean, he is a king. He's pretty proud of himself anyway. And while we can stop that there, he says he displayed her beauty to the people and the nobles, for she was lovely to. Displayed her beauty to the people and the nobles, for she was lovely to look at. So, king was drunk. He decides to show off another one of his prized possessions, his bride, his wife, his queen, Vashti. Now, as I studied for this, I read a couple different scenarios, and scholars kind of wrestle with the meaning of this command that Xerxes sent to Vashti, this command of to see him, come with her royal crown and display her beauty before people and nobles. Some scholars have suggested that the command was for Vashti to come not wearing a veil. And this would have been a big no-no. You should have worn a veil, come with her face uncovered. This would have been a massive scandal. This would have been considered immoral. This would have been a bad deal in Persia at the time. But some other scholars think it even went further than that. Some other scholars believe that, this command of Vashti to come wearing her crown was just that. Come wearing your crown and nothing else. And so this was a very, very immoral request. That would have been a very, very different type of scandal. But regardless, there was an immoral aspect of the king's request to display his wife. But regardless of what it actually meant, the specific meaning of the request, Vashti really did the unthinkable. She said, no, not going to do it. No, I'm not going to do it. In fact, she didn't say no. She said, heck no, I'm not coming to do that. But at this time in history, you didn't say no to the king, especially if you were a female person. You didn't say no to the king, and at least not if you wanted to keep breathing. But I personally think there's a ton to admire about Vashti. She had some integrity here. In the middle of the drunken debauchery and all this, she said, no, this is blatantly wrong. I'm not going to do this. Don't pull me away from this thing. She stood up for herself, and she stood up against, it's not just for herself, for the strongest man in the universe. She stood up to He-Man of her time, okay? She stood up to and said, no, I'm not going to do that. And I say, good for her. Good for her. But how did Xerxes take the news? You can just imagine. Verse 12, the king became furious and burned with anger. He was ticked. So I don't know exactly how all this went down. Again, you read your Bible. I would greatly appreciate that. But Xerxes pulls together, and I just still imagine he's still soused. He's pulling together his drunken wise men to figure out what to do about Vashti having the audacity to say no to the king. It's almost kind of like the wise men flip out a little bit. I don't know exactly what went down, but I said, hey, if the queen can get away with this, if the queen can say no to the king, what's this going to do to the rest of the women in the kingdom? They will quit doing what we ask them to do. We can't allow this. So you got a bunch of insecure men making dumb decisions, probably a little drunk on wine. We can't have our wives telling us no. And there was just this massive overreaction that happened here. And then one of Xerxes' wise men came up with this plan. And here's what the plan was, Esther 1:19. It says, therefore, Xerxes, if it pleases you, if it pleases the king, let him issue a royal decree and let it be written in the laws of Persia and Media. I can't talk today, which cannot be repealed. In other words, we're writing this one in stone. Okay, this can't be changed. That Vashti is never again to enter the presence of King Xerxes. Now, at this point, maybe saying, Todd, where are we going with all this? What's this have to do with God being absent in the moment? What's this have to do with God's plan always being active and invincible? And we're talking about Esther. All we've got now, right now, is this. this drunken 6-month-long party and over-the-top display of carnal appetites, overeating, overdrinking, a bunch of insecure men making insecure decisions. I mean, what's this have to do with anything? Think about everything I just said, and now think about this. God may not seem present in the moment, but that doesn't mean that God's been removed from the scene. Because look at the final outcome of the suggestion from the wise men. He said, so, let her not come into your presence, but also let the king give her royal position to someone else who is better than she. Cut to the chase. Exit Vashti. Enter Esther. Out of this massively immoral, massively ungodly time, there's a point to God's sovereignty and divine providence. And I think about it this way: does God need to accomplish something in his plan? And we're going to get to this plan of genocide and stuff in the coming weeks. But while all this was going on in the palace, these drunkenness and debauchery and all these other things going on, Esther had no idea any of this was happening. Esther was an ordinary Jewish girl living an ordinary Jewish life in Susa, in her little community, just, nothing really. She had no idea any of this was going on, but behind the scenes, God is setting the stage for her entrance, and her entrance will be leveraged by God for God to keep a promise he made to the Jewish people, but she has no idea about any of it. But God in his providence does. This is the wonder of God's sovereignty and the wonder of God's divine providence. God is working behind the scenes to push, pull, rearrange events, change people's minds, change people until he brings about the results that he wants. Even out of a 187-day party of drunkenness and debauchery and overindulging, despite the most immoral and unspiritual setting, God leverages what needs to be done to set his perfect plan in place. And today in 2023, God is not asleep. God's not asleep when it comes to people or events, or even to nations. God's not out of touch with the immorality in our world. God's not sitting in heaven wringing his hands going, I don't know what to do, I don't know what to do, I don't know what to do when it comes to those people or those leaders. I don't know what to do with this government. Oh man, I don't know what to do with that nation or any of these things when it seems like it's unfair, when it seems like it's rash, when it seems like it's immoral, when it seems like it's just plain stupid decisions. God's not up there going, I don't know what to do. God's always at work. We should take comfort, we should take peace in that God is always at work. And God can and does work directly to accomplish his will, the miracles, the parting of the waters. He can directly impact and act according to his will, but he also is going to work indirectly through free will and through our choices, our good choices and our bad choices. He will leverage them to accomplish his will because God is always at work, his plans are always active, and his will is always invincible. The thing that we can so easily forget is that God's ways are just so different than ours. And when we don't understand what's happening in the world, or we don't understand what's happening in our lives or in the people's lives around us, because we don't understand, we can easily jump to wrong conclusions. We can start to act irrationally. We can start to act foolishly. We can freak out and become paralyzed with fear because we don't understand. But God is always at work. It's in Isaiah that it's written, it says, for my thoughts are not your thoughts, nor are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. As we study this summer, this book that never mentions God. We will see God all the more profoundly working throughout it. And what I'm hoping we will learn, what I'm hoping you will learn, and what I'm hoping you'll embrace, what I'm hoping you'll have change our lives over the next several weeks is the truth that in the middle of our day-to-day lives, even when we don't feel like we can see God at work, God is working. God is working, often in ways we could never imagine. And when we face the fear and the pain and the hardships of life, God, in his sovereignty, is still in control. In the middle of that pain we're dealing with in life, God is in control. With the threat of illness or the impending surgery, God is in control. When our emotions are taxed to the point that we think we may implode, God is still in control. When it looks like that relationship has been broken beyond repair, God's plan is still active and his will is still invincible. As you experience that loss that led to the unbearable grief, God is still present. Even when you experience that spiritual void that threatens your soul, God may seem absent in the moment, but that doesn't mean God's hand has been removed from the scene. God's always at work. His plan is always active, and his will is always invincible. The thing we have to realize is that God's plans are not stopped when the events of this world are immoral or unspiritual. God's presence penetrates regardless. God's not limited. God's not limited to working only in the Christian environments, at the Christian concerts, within Christian families and Christian church buildings. God is much at work in the corporate office and the Oval Office as he is in the church morning service. God's isn't much at work in countries like China and Russia and Syria as he is in America. And if we don't believe these things, all we're trying to do is draw a line around God's sovereignty to put him in a box or give him borders, and it's just not the way God works. He's moving. He's touching lives. He's shaping kingdoms. He's never surprised by what humanity does. He's not going to be surprised by what you do. And just because actions or motives happen to be worldly, happen to be unfair, that doesn't mean he's not present. And those involved in those things in our world, those things may not be glorifying him. Those people may not be glorifying him, but they aren't controlling him and they aren't stopping him. God's always at work. His plan is always active, and his will is always invincible. And so I have two challenges for you this week. One, get a Bible. Open it to the book of Esther and start reading this incredible story of God's sovereignty and God's providence on your own. I promise you we'll do the best we can to break it down every week. If you don't have a Bible, there's a table right back here. Sorry, guys, online, you can't get one right now. You have to come to church, okay? But back there on the table, grab a Bible. Take it. Read the story. Second challenge I have is be back. Be back next week, but be back with a friend in your life that needs to hear the hope, the joy, the peace that can only come from a relationship with a sovereign and providential God. Let's pray together. Heavenly Father, we thank you for your sovereignty and your providence. We thank you that you are in control even when we feel like life is out of control. And God, I pray today for those people who are feeling that way. God, to be honest with you, in the past 5 or 6 weeks, there's been moments in our lives, in my life, in my wife's life, where it's like, holy cow, this really reeks. This is really rough. This is really hard. But God, you were in control the whole time. And God, for whatever people are experiencing right now, and maybe they're down by the way things are going in the world. Maybe they're experiencing health issues. Maybe it's relational issues. God, I pray that they can find hope and find peace in the truth that you are in control. Your plans cannot be thwarted. Your will cannot be diverted. God, for some that may are investigating you, that maybe are skeptical about all this, God, I pray that you would give them the encouragement and the courage to at least have honest conversations about these things. One of the amazing things about an account like Esther, God, is that you gave this to us so that we could see this is how you work. This is not something we're making up. This is something that has been given to us in our Scripture. So God, I pray that you would work and you would move in our lives and meet us individually where we're at and help us to take those next steps we need to draw and grow in closer to you. We pray these things in the holy and precious name of Jesus. Amen. Now, today, and I know this can be one of those things that's like, hey, we're kind of wrestling with sovereignty, providence, free will, all this other stuff. Maybe this opens some questions. Maybe you're in a situation where you're going, man, I think I want God. I don't know. I don't know if I understand this. I don't know if I understand all these things. Oh, man, we would love to engage with you. We'd love to connect with you. Just text us, Jesus for me, to 94,000. A pastor would get in touch, and we just love to have open conversation. If you're willing to have open conversation with us, we're willing to have open conversation with you. And fill out a connection card, mark on the back, or write us a note. We would love to follow up with you and just talk and share our hope that we have in this God that we believe in and trust in. So please let us know if you'd love to have conversation or if you'd love to make some type of commitment. We'd love to connect with you in that. Now, Jackson gave you 8,000 announcements and threw a whole bunch of stuff here on the floor that you got to clean this up, Jackson. But I want to share one more thing with you. When you came in, hopefully you were given this little card or this little flyer, I guess. On one side is the blood drive. We want your blood. Okay. It's funny. We'd love for you to come and give blood, all that. Jackson, I want to see you pass out. So come give blood, Jackson. But on the back of this is a women's event that's happening Wednesday. I wanted to point this out because I think this is kind of a big deal. I think this could be really life impacting for a lot of people. Cynthia Martin's daughter is in town for the holidays. She is a certified Enneagram person. I don't know what the right title, coach, I think is the right for that. Enneagram is one of these personality, how you're wired type of assessments, a very famous one. The reason I think it's so important is as you approach something like this from a biblical perspective with